Norma Basalis, the inferior view of the skull. It involves the brain of the neurocranium and the viscerocranium, except the mandible. The bones forming the Norma Basalis divides the Norma Basalis into anterior, middle, and the posterior part. The bones from the anterior to posterior are the maxilla, the palatine, the zygomatic, the sphenoid, lesser wing, and the greater wing. The temporal, with its petrous part and its squamous part, forming the mandibular fossa, involving its stylite process and the mastoid process. Occipital, and partly the parietal bone. The anterior two-thirds of the hard palate is formed by the maxilla. Behind the incisive teeth is incisive foramen. Between the two maxilla is intermaxillary suture. The suture separating the maxilla from the palatine bone, forming the posterior one-third of the palate, is called palatino-maxillary or maxillopalatine suture. Between the palatine bones is called interpalatine suture. At the lateral walls of the palatine bone is greater and lesser palatine foramen. The posterior free ends of the palatine or the hard palate is called posterior nasal apertures or choana. Separating the two nasal cavities is vomer. The dilated part of the vomer is called ala. Lateral to the nasal cavities, the lateral pterygoid plate, the medial pterygoid plate, the pterygoid fossa, the foramen ovale, the foramen spinosum. The posterior wall of the maxilla is inferior orbital fissure separating the greater wing of the sphenoid, the maxilla, and the zygomatic bone. The temporal process of the zygomatic bone and the zygomatic process of the temporal bone forming the zygomatic arch. The squamous part of the temporal bone has a fossa called the mandibular fossa, with the neck of the mandible attached to form the temporomandibular joint, forming the lower jaw. The petrous part of the temporal bone is the carotid canal and the jugular foramen. The carotid canal bypasses the internal carotid artery. The jugular foramen passes the internal jugular vein and the cranial nerve number 7 and 8. The hypoglossal canal, from where the hypoglossal nerve passes. The basilar part of the occipital bone is a protuberance called pharyngeal tubercle. The anterior surface of the foramen magnum is two condyles called the occipital condyles. Behind the stylite process is the stylomastoid foramen. Squamous part of the occipital bone. The foramen magnum is attached with the external occipital protuberance with the external occipital crust. The superior knuckle line, the inferior knuckle line.